Hey guys, welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Thanks for being here. So I want to do something a little bit different today, and I want to go over all of the recent foreign policy decisions the United States has made, and let's just see how well that is going. Let's just see, are we safer? Are we better off? Are people more democratic? I mean, what is actually happening here? So let's start off with Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. She's now left. It went fine for Nancy, it seems. Her plane's fine. She didn't get shot out of the sky like she was saying the military is worried about. But there are some now ramifications from this, right? So China said, if you go, there's going to be some serious consequences for this. And they're not bluffing. They can't bluff. If they then back down from that, they're going to look weak. So we're now looking for the response that China is going to have to this visit. And I want to start off by just pointing out this Politico article. This was from back in May. And this was, here, look at what it says. Deadly serious. U.S. quietly urging Taiwan to follow Ukraine playbook for countering China. You can't make this up. They're saying, we want you to be the next Ukraine. This is what the administration was pushing Taiwan into. And now you see Nancy Pelosi taking that trip to Taiwan. So it seems that they're serious about turning Taiwan into the next Ukraine. We know that one of the reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine and exerted themselves on Ukraine was because of several warnings they had had over the decades, actually, when it comes to that conflict. And the same thing's been going on with China and Taiwan. Over the decades, they have said, this is a red line for us. Taiwan is a red line. Do not mess with that red line. And what are we doing now? So even though we see how well things are going in Ukraine, not that well at all. Ukraine is losing territory. They're losing civilians. They're drafting people. It is not going as well as Western media is making it sound. And now the administration is actively saying to Taiwan, we want you to be the next Ukraine. It even says in this article, U.S. officials are pushing their Taiwanese counterparts with new urgency to look to Ukraine's success in fending off Russian forces as a blueprint for countering a Chinese attack. Former and current U.S. officials tell Politico. Okay, so now let's fast forward to today, because that was written back in May. Clearly, the administration means it. They want Taiwan to be the next Ukraine. That's why Nancy Pelosi made this calculation and went and visited Taiwan. Here's this New York Times article. After Pelosi's arrival, China announced military drills in nearby waters. So China is now saying we're going to be testing military equipment, doing drills, firing off missiles. We're going to be doing all of these things. And we're just letting you know that this is in direct response to Nancy Pelosi's visit. So the question is, how long are these drills going to last? Are they just a few days? Are they longer than a few days? And let me show you why that matters, because here is this. China is testing out a blockade. So this Twitter user, Spiritor, posted this map of where the military exercises are happening, noting that it looks like drills for a blockade. So that is, now Taiwan largely relies on China for its imports. And if China blockades Taiwan, that is the only thing they really need to do in order to debilitate them seriously. They don't need to go to war. They don't need to invade. They don't even need to fire missiles. They just need to block the country from receiving any imports. So that testing of the blockade, how long is this going to last? Is this a warning to Taiwan? I'm sure it is a warning to let them know we can surround you and we could debilitate you. We don't even need to fire a shot. We just need to make sure you can't get the things you need. Bloomberg then shows us this. China then imposes economic curbs on Taiwan with sand and fruit bans. Now, they've done the sand ban in the past. They did that they were saying that it was for environmental reasons. But again, China exerting itself, saying, don't mess with us, Taiwan. Don't do this. Don't get too cozy with the West. We believe in a one China policy. Don't go forward with these relationships and don't press your luck, is what China is basically saying to Taiwan. And that is a very serious threat. The reality is Taiwan, as I mentioned, relies on those Chinese imports for their survival. We're not importing goods to Taiwan. And at most, we're going to what? Import weapons to Taiwan to help them try to defend themselves, but that won't do them any good. They still will rely on those imports from China. So what is going to happen if China says, no more imports for you, Taiwan? That's it. We're just going to cut you off until you concede. And they would eventually have to. So they could just starve the people of the goods and services they need in order to get them to bend to their will. And I think China is now flexing its muscles and exerting itself over that. And quite frankly, the United States, we don't have a history of caring. We don't have a history of saying, oh, maybe it is time to back down because this could actually result in serious consequences for you. We have not had a history of saying that to any country since World War II. I mean, we're still hanging our hat on World War II victories and saying we're the good guys. We're doing a great job. Look at how we're the heroes of the world. We're hanging our hat on something that is 75 years old, and we're running with it. And we're still saying we're the good guys. Meanwhile, we've got Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, the list goes on, Ukraine, the list goes on. U.S. foreign policy has not been beneficial for the people in those nations. And now it looks like we're willing to sacrifice Taiwan. So I want to show you this clip. This is from the Chinese ambassador. He is speaking to CNN. And watch this first clip. He talks about Ukraine and the double standards the United States has when it comes to the two countries.
Your government objects. You just condemned it. What will it do about it is the big question. Are these military exercises designed to frighten Taiwan? Will there be a break in relations, any sanctions? What would happen in the U.S.-Chinese relationship?
Well, people should not confuse the question of Taiwan with the Ukrainian conflict. And on the question of Taiwan, it concerns China's core interest. And some people here in the United States, on the issue of Ukraine, they emphasized national sovereignty and territorial integrity. But why they do whatever they want to damage China's core interest, infringe China's national sovereignty, territorial integrity. This is a play of a double standards. So we firmly reject that. And China has every right to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are fully justified to do what we must. The current situation is created purely by the US side. So of course, it has to bear the responsibilities.
Okay, so he is saying that there's a double standard because the United States says to Ukraine, you have every right to defend your territory, your sovereignty. You have every right to do that. And we're going to help you by giving you some weapons. And on the flip side, they're saying to China, you don't have that same right. So because China believes that Taiwan is part of China. And we've actually recognized Taiwan as part of China since 1979. So that's agreed upon. Much of the world agrees as well that Taiwan is a part of China. And again, this comes back to, if you missed my last episode, this stems back to a civil war between the aristocratic nationalist government that was running China. And then there was a civil war that broke out in the 40s. The communists won. They ousted the aristocratic nationalist party. That party leadership ran off to Taiwan, the island. They ran off to an island. They took it over and they declared themselves the true government. And they said, that government is not legitimate. Yeah, they might have ousted us. They might be taking over Beijing, but they're not legitimate. We're still the legitimate government. And there was this conflict for years, for decades, really, between the two governments on who was the legitimate Chinese government. And that was really settled in 1979 by the United States when we said, okay, we recognize the CPC as the legitimate government of China, but there's also this Taiwan kind of thing going on. So China then rejects that and says, no, they lost the war. They're still part of us. They just haven't conceded the fact that they've lost and they need to concede. But now we're in this new era where the older generation of Taiwanese that were around for all of that squabble and really they were intimately more involved in it, they're really, really split on which direction they wanted to go. Do they want to go back and be a part of the CPC and join communist China? Not so much. Or do they want to remain a free and independent, more capitalist society? And many of the people living on the island wanted to remain more in this capitalist, non-communist society. But many of them wanted to join mainland. And actually, many of them have hoped throughout the decades that there could be some sort of mixing, like kind of like Hong Kong. They were thinking, well, we can remain capitalist, we can remain this sort of independent democracy, but be a part of China and rejoin the country, but just kind of still have this separate nation thing. But since Hong Kong and what has been going on in Hong Kong, especially amongst the younger generation in Taiwan, they're a little bit less, they're desiring that less. They're thinking, I don't know if I trust that if we go back and be part of China like the way Hong Kong was, that we're going to truly still remain, that life will remain the way that it's been, because everybody is comfortable the way they are living. They don't want change. Now, the older generation that kind of knew maybe the two different systems and whatnot, they might be like, well, but the younger kids, especially that were born and raised in Taiwan, modern day Taiwan, they're much more hesitant to go back and join the CPC, as you can imagine. But nonetheless, this is an internal dispute between those two groups of people. They've got to work it out. So he's saying, so this ambassador to China is saying that this is a double standard. The United States is recognizing Ukraine's right to sovereignty and territorial integrity, but not China's. And they are instead stepping on on China by saying, well, whatever, Taiwan's now its own independent country and whatnot. So look at this other clip. This is what else he had to say.
President Xi Jinping, is he so determined to get Taiwan that if necessary, he will take it by force?
Well, to achieve the reunification, as I said earlier, is the firm and the strong will of the whole Chinese nation. So China's sovereignty cannot be infringed, and the Chinese people cannot be humiliated, and the reunification of China cannot be stopped. We said repeatedly in recent time that the PLA will not stay idle. And the duty of PLA, the China's military, is to defend China's sovereignty, territorial integrity.
Mr. Abess.
So we will take whatever we can to respond and to protect, to safeguard our sovereignty, territorial integrity. And our response will be very firm, strong, and forceful.
Okay, so there's China's response to this. And my guess is they realize that they have to actually follow through. And that is very scary. I don't think they're bluffing. I don't think they can bluff. I think they have to show that they're going to follow through with their threats, or they will be viewed as weak. They know this, and they're now in a much stronger position to flex their muscles. So we will see in the coming days what kind of consequences this truly has for Taiwan. At this point, they have circled the island. They're firing off tests, and they're halting certain imports. That could get worse if Taiwan continues to cozy up to the United States in a way that China feels that it is completely threatening. This is a red line for them. I don't think that this is the right way to go about this. I'm not really sure what the right way is, to be honest with you. I just know that this could have some serious debilitating consequences for Taiwan in the same way that Ukraine is experiencing serious and debilitating consequences. Now, let's move on to this next foreign policy decision that the United States government has recently taken. And this was in the killing of al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri. And the U.S., very proud of themselves, taking out this al-Qaeda leader. But now the U.S. State Department, and remember, they said to us, oh, this is a great thing. We are so much safer. But now here's this. Check out this headline. The U.S. State Department warns of possible retaliation over al-Qaeda death. Yeah, here's the State Department. They remain concerned so this is what the State Department, they issued this travel advisory and just this kind of U.S. citizen advisory. And this is what it says. The Department of State remains concerned about the continued threat of terrorist attacks, demonstrations, and other violent actions against U.S. citizens and interests overseas. The Department of State believes there is a higher potential for anti-American violence given the death of Ayman al-Zawahiri on July 31st, 2022. So we're less safe, it turns out. That's after they told us we were safer. And remember this, here's their statement after they actually took out the guy. They said, the world is a safer place following the death of al-Zawahiri, and the United States will continue to act resolutely against those who would threaten our country, our people, our allies, and our partners. But now, a day later, they come out and they say, well, actually, maybe we're less safe. So it wasn't that safe to take him out. We aren't safer. They made this policy decision. They said, let's take out this al-Qaeda guy because he's a threat to the United States. I don't know if anybody actually feels like al-Qaeda is a genuine, true threat to the United States at this point. Do you worry as you sit in your home that al-Qaeda is going to storm in and take over? Do you worry that they're going to enact terrorist threats here in the United States, or terrorist actual attacks here in the United States? Are you worried about that every day as you walk out your front door? I think most Americans have now moved on from that and realized that, obviously we had September 11th. That was an extremely frightening, terrible event that happened, attack here on this country. A lot of people, though, now in hindsight look at it and say, but we haven't really had attacks like this. The subsequent attacks have been because of our invasion of Iraq. Our subsequent attacks have been because of the various foreign policy decisions we've made in the Middle East. So maybe we should just get out. That has been the sentiment of most Americans at this point. There was a time when most Americans said, nah, we got to go get them. But then sentiments shifted because we saw the actual consequences of those actions. It didn't make things better. It didn't make the world safer. Instead, ISIS rose up. I mean, we just have problem after problem after problem because of our foreign policy decision to go after terrorists, the war on terror. And this assassination was part of that war on terror. They said, now we're safer. And then suddenly a day later, they say, actually, now we're not. So we're not safer. Great. Now we have a problem on our hands. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Saudi Arabia and the United States. So as you know, Joe Biden went to Saudi Arabia begging for them to release barrels of oil. They pretty much said, nah, you're at our mercy. You're not really friendly to us, Joe Biden. We don't really like you. We're kind of moving on with some new partnerships over with Russia and China. And we're making some new friends. And not sure if we want to be besties anymore. And you kind of keep snubbing us, fist bump. So in response, the United States scrambling to try to get into the good graces of the Saudi monarchy again, instead decides to sell them a bunch of weapons. So this was something Joe Biden said he wasn't going to do, but now they are, in fact, supplying Saudi Arabia with more weapons. Here's this one. Saudi Arabia would buy 300 Raytheon technology-made MIM-10 104E Patriot missiles for more than $3 billion. Control stations, fire control, and other equipment will be included. And it goes on to say here, this batch of Patriot missiles would replenish a dwindling stockpile. According to DSCA, the sale is meant to defend against attacks by Houthi rebels from Yemen, who shoot ballistic missiles and unmanned aerial systems into Saudi territory. So, right, we are now helping them in their war in Yemen. Now, the State Department is saying, well, or the Defense Department, or both, they're saying, well, yeah, but these aren't offensive weapons. These are just defensive weapons only. So this is like what is going on with Ukraine. We're only selling them defensive weapons. We're not giving them any offensive weapons. And that's what they're saying about Saudi Arabia. However, they are actually thinking about sending them offensive weapons. This is something they said they weren't going to do. This is from Reuters. U.S. weighs a resumption of offensive arms sales to Saudis, sources say. So again, to try to get into the good graces with the Saudis, realizing that we've got a problem with oil and we need them and that relationship. And that relationship was set up years ago, decades ago. We made a deal with the Saudis that they would sell oil exclusively in U.S. dollars in exchange for defense. We were supposed to supply them with weapons. Well, then the war with Yemen, and it's really bad. And we're all seeing that this war is horrific and horrible, and we don't really want to be a part of it. And so there's been this slowdown of wanting to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, wanting to support them in their own foreign policy antics. And so we've got this dilemma, right? Because they're helping prop up the value of the U.S. dollar. But at the same time, we don't agree with a lot of their decisions, like the killing of Jamal Khashoggi and also what they're doing in Yemen. So we've got a problem here. And now Saudi Arabia, recognizing that we're having this internal moral dilemma, that the American people are not so thrilled with Saudi Arabia. After all, it was a bunch of Saudis that actually committed the attack on 9/11 here on U.S. soil. And yet then we go around and we invade all these other countries. I mean, Americans are catching on. So Americans are saying, I'm not so sure about this relationship with Saudi Arabia. And the administration recognizes, yeah, okay, Americans aren't so thrilled with this. But at the same time, they're propping up the value of the U.S. dollar. And if the U.S. dollar collapses, we've got a serious problem here at home. And Saudi Arabia, knowing that we're having this moral dilemma, has started to make friends with other major countries around the world and starting to now open up and sell oil outside without requiring U.S. dollars. So the administration is now scrambling and just saying, all right, fine, let's give you some more weapons. We'll give you some more weapons. We'll just turn a blind eye to this all. And, and really the conversation, what needs to happen here in the United States, because I understand that dilemma. We can't have the dollar collapse. That's a real problem. Just like it's a real problem if Taiwan were to be captured and taken in by China and then they control all the semiconductors. I understand the national security implications of all of this, but bullying and strong-arming and also just enabling like Saudi Arabia to commit human rights abuses is not the path forward. There's got to be a better way. And our government, our representatives, our leaders, they need to be having the discussions on what is the best way to insulate and protect America and American people and American interests. And where can we get back in line when it comes to foreign policy? We've been going in the wrong direction when it comes to foreign policy. And now it's led us down this road where we are in serious trouble. And we've got this problem where we've been going around offering weapons, being the world's police, defending these countries, helping countries that really are committing all these human rights abuses, encroaching on others' territory. I mean, we're causing a lot of problems. So we need to maybe stop and rethink, how can we best do this? And maybe a lot of that would come back to talking about manufacturing here in the United States, insulating ourselves so that we're not so reliant on imports, that we are instead, trying to make ourselves self-sufficient. That would be with all kinds of things from energy to actual goods and things like semiconductors, things like during the pandemic, we learned like face masks and sanitizers and, all of these things that people were demanding, and it was all coming from China. We need to be actually focusing more on insulating ourselves as America. We need to bring back manufacturing somehow. We need to bring back those resources. And that is something that the administration really should start talking about more and focusing on more. But that was a Trump talking point. And so they don't want to go really in there. I mean, we're starting to see it slightly a little bit with Joe Biden. But Democrats really need to embrace that idea rather than saying, oh, no, we're never becoming a manufacturing country again. We need to rethink all of our strategies, I think, when it comes to how are we really truly securing our national security, our sovereignty, the well-being for America. There needs to be a serious reshift because clearly these foreign policy decisions are not working. Certainly now I could, at least with Taiwan and Saudi Arabia, I can understand the justification a little bit, right? It's like, well, we need the semiconductors and we need the oil, but what in the world with the Al-Qaeda leader? Well, why did we do that? I thought we left Afghanistan. Why do we then go and drone a guy, making us less safe in the end? Why did we do that? For what purpose? That is something that, was it? And in that one, that looks more glaringly like supporting the military industrial complex, keeping it going, helping other interests in the Middle East that, quite frankly, are not helpful to the American people. So we need to start refocusing, re-gearing, and telling our leadership and our representatives in Washington that is where we're at mentally. And the way we do that, obviously, is by voting very differently and making a lot of noise. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And join me in my locals community where I do casual live streams, give you updates first and foremost, and you can also interact with one another. It's a really great place, and it's a great way to support this show. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.